Welcome to a new episode on our YouTube channel. In this video, we're talking about fancy real estate information. So if you're interested to learn a lot about real estate and how you can create a big real estate portfolio, this video is perfectly fitting. Okay, let's get started and let's talk about how a bank defines if they give you a loan, and especially if they give you loans in the future to create an even bigger real estate portfolio. Two things are crucial to understand. On one hand, your equity, so your own liquid capital, and also how do your monthly expenses look like in comparison to your income. So if you have, for example, a fancy car, which just gives you liability, costs money, and no equity also on the other hand, it would be bad for your credit score. This would decrease your options of getting more loans in the future. One example. So equity, let's get started in the first step. In the first step, you typically need 10% initial equity capital for the buying tax, the notary, and possibly any property agent. Okay, so any makler, property agent. If we talk about monthly expenses, let's say this apartment, let's say you buy something and you rent it out. Let's say you have 200 euros expenses in the first place after the rent you receive, because you have possibly 600 euros rent and 800 euros costs for interest, amortization, property management, maintenance, and so on. Okay? So now you have minus 200 on this side. This is, let's say, step one. Okay? You bought something for 200,000, so let's say you invested 20,000 euros. This is the first apartment. Now let's talk about the second apartment. You also need 10% equity. Typically, it's even possible without any equity, but let's say 10%. 10%. And you also need 200 euros. Let's say covering all the costs and savings for future renovations and so on. Okay? But now, what you could do is you tell the bank, okay, dear bank, I've bought this apartment, the first one, let's do it here, for 200,000. The value increased to 240, and I only have a mortgage left of 180, let's say, because in the first years you pay more interest and less amortization. So you have a profit of 60,000 euros on the paper. Now, typically banks consider 80% of that. So you have 60,000, 80%, and now you just take a loan for the second apartment and you refinance your first apartment. Okay? Or let's say you just take a loan from the bank and say, dear bank, please give me 20,000 euros. I would like to buy another property. So now you have 20,000 again without putting any equity, well, let's say any cash into that real estate purchase. So now you have the 20,000, the bank gave you the 20,000, but real estate assets are the best security you can show to a bank. So if you have real estate wealth, and especially you have a good comparison between the current value plus also the current mortgage level, the bank is happy to give you more loan. Okay, now they give you 20,000 euros, but since you have such a good security, they give you this loan for, there were times they gave it to you for 0 point something, but let's say even they give it to you for 2% when the market situation is 3.54%. So on one hand, you save the equity, but on the other hand, you also save money on interest. So might be the case that you don't have 200 euros expenses, that you only have, let's say, 150 expenses. So you win on two sides. But it becomes even better. Now, let's say the tenant left this apartment after 2 or 3 years. So after 2 or 3 years, you don't contribute 200 euros out of your own pocket anymore. Let's say you have 100 euros profit, just as an example. Now you see, you have 100 euros profit, you have 150 costs. Let's make it easy before taxes. So you have only 50 euros out of your own pocket for the second apartment. Now, obviously, you just repeat. You have, by the third apartment, you also need 10%, so you need 20,000 euros. Now, probably it makes the most sense that you just take another 20,000 here, but now probably the value is not 240, now the value is 260, and mortgage is 170. Yeah, also here you have a profit. You could also easily take this loan here. So you just take another 20,000 from the first apartment. You buy the third apartment, let's say another 200 expenses. Now you increase the rent here, because you could also just increase the rent even if the tenant is still in the apartment by 15 to 20%, depends on the city. So now you might have, let's say, 150. Oh, you might have 150. Let's say you still pay the 50 from the second apartment. So now you have 200 plus. You have minus 200, so in the end, the third apartment is free of charge for you. And now you can obviously imagine that you could just buy and buy and buy and buy more apartments without investing many cash out of your own pocket as a lump sum, let's say as initial equity capital, and also without paying high monthly expenses out of your own pocket. And now you also see why it's so important to start as early as possible. Let's come back here. Because the earlier you start with the first apartment, the earlier you can buy the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and so on. Now you might say, yeah, but if I'm always taking new loans here on my first apartment, then I will never be finished with my loan. Yeah, it depends. Obviously, at a certain point, when you have 10 apartments, let's say, you say, okay, this is sufficient. I have now 10 apartments, so now I'm not taking any loans against this. But if that's the case in, let's say, 20, 25 years, you probably have just real estate income of 2,000 to 3,000 euros, let's say, or if you have 10 apartments, significantly more. So let's say you have 5,000 euros real estate income on top to your other income. So you actually don't care if it takes longer to finish the loan, because you have 5,000 euros income without working. And if you now have 5,000 euros income, you could obviously also just do it later. An unscheduled payment, which is typically always possible, 5% of the mortgage amount every year. And you just, in the end, buy yourself the time back and you just repay the loan faster at that point and not earlier. Because earlier, it makes sense to use at least own cash to buy real estate. If we're talking about renting out and your own assets, so let's say you have cash on your bank account, which shouldn't be there. So let's say you have 50,000 euros on your bank account. So what you now do is you invest that money, because if we have, let's say here, 2% gross interest rate, which is fully tax deductible, so you have 1 point something net, who cares about this interest here? You just invest that money 6 to 9%. And now we achieve many, many really good things. You have high monthly income. This income can be even increased during retirement. Then you also have access to cash, so you have flexibility. You have high interest here. You have cash to make any lump sum payment, to travel, or so whatsoever. So now we solved your wealth building area. Now, it makes sense to also have a tax optimized investment plan on the side to save some taxes. Tax benefits could also be reinvested here to create even more leverage. But now you see that it's not rocket science to create a big real estate portfolio, and it's not about your budget or your savings that you don't own 5 to 10 apartments. It's probably just because never anyone told you that it's actually so easy to create a big real estate portfolio. Obviously, you have to keep in mind you need to buy good apartments, so you have a good value increase here, so you can use this. Also, it's important to rent it out to have huge tax benefits, and that you could also buy small apartments. Plus, you don't have much liability on the side for the house. It's important that you increase the rent, or that you buy an apartment where the tenant is moving out often, so you can adjust the market rent more, your rent to the market rent. So many things to consider. So this also works in practice. If you make mistakes here yourself, you might have issues in the future getting new loans and so on. So if you would like to have support creating a big real estate portfolio in the future, and that you don't make any mistakes yourself, feel free to reach out, visit our website, register for free initial consultation. Maybe we will even talk to each other, and then we can find out how we can create a big real estate portfolio specifically in your situation. So take care, and possibly talk to you soon.